Welcome, everybody, to WorldNetDaily's coverage of the presidential debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. My name is Matt Edwards. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here this evening. We are going to have full coverage of the debate, so you can sit back, relax, and watch the entire thing. We've got a great panel assembled. We may have some special guests coming on throughout as well. But let's invite Elizabeth Farah and Brian Allman up on stage here. Hello, folks. How are you this evening?
Go on, Brian. Let it all out. Tell us how you're feeling.
Excuse me, Matt. I'm speaking.
Yes. Oh, here we go. The quips will fly. The quips will fly. Well, folks, we want to make sure. Hey, there's our special guest. Wonderful, Kira Davis. Welcome, Kira.
Hi. Sorry, guys.
Hey, that's okay. We know what you're dealing with out there in California right now, and I don't just mean California stuff, but I mean some urgency stuff out there. So we will definitely have prayers going out to you for that. She's dealing with some wildfires, right, Kira? Do we want a little update there?
What does the rest of your T-shirt say, Kira?
Oh, parents, not partisans.
Not partisans. Okay, thank
Very
you.
good.
I'm sorry, I should frame that a little bit better. So I'm near, there's 3 fires burning right now in a big triangle: bridge fire, airport fire, and lime fire. I'm near the airport fire, which is in Trabuco Canyon. It's actually getting worse. It's 0% contained. It went from 7 acres last night when it first got reported. It is now at 9,300 acres.
Oh,
and it's climbing. It's jumped a freeway. So that's kind of a big deal. I'm not worried about the fire getting here, because I live in this little, cement enclave. But I'm more worried about the evacuation orders hitting us, which they're coming closer and closer. So I might have to leave in the middle of this broadcast. We'll see.
We'll let you go.
Yeah, and many prayers for you and, of course, your neighbors and that whole region out there. Wildfires are no fun.
And our governor is not here, by the way. He's in Pennsylvania.
Oh, what a shock. Gavin Newsom's in Pennsylvania. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are here. We are live. We're going to be watching this debate, so I'm glad to have everybody here. We have about a half hour to go, less about 27 minutes or so before the debate is scheduled to start. We will be carrying it live here, so you don't have to go anywhere. We will do our best to break in when we need to during the commercials to keep things moving along. But for this first half hour, we thought, we don't get too many opportunities to go over some classic debate moments in life. And we all have our favorite moments, but we do have this montage that our producers pulled. And so we want to kind of kick it off with some fun moments here. Here are some highlights from past modern day presidential debates.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
One reason people are skeptical is because people don't answer the questions they've been asked.
We've never had anything like this happen in any of our elections before.
That was a great pivot off the fact that you want open borders, okay? How did we get onto Putin?
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe.
My party is
and
me.
Socialist
right
healthcare.
now, I am
and
the
they're going to dominate
Party.
you, Joe. You know that.
I am the Democratic Party right now. The platform of the
Not
Democratic Party
Harris.
is what I, in fact, approved of.
You shut up, man. Listen, are you in favor of law and order?
I'm in favor of law. You follow it.
Are you in favor of law and order? Go ahead.
And a little bit of order. Elizabeth, like we've said before when we were here for the Biden-Trump debate, we feel like we've seen it all, and then we saw the Biden-Trump debate. What do you expect tonight?
I think that it's going to go probably toward Trump. I think that Kamala, whatever, has a lot to worry about because she hasn't. You can practice at home. My kids used to be in forensic speech and debate, Christian speech and debate, getting out there and getting in front of not a hostile, but just not your mom and dad kind of a group or your debate club, and having to answer questions off the cuff and come up there and present your case to a hostile opponent, hostile teenagers, Christian teenagers, but still, it's a million miles different. And I don't think that she is prepared. I also think that because she is representing the status quo, that she is in big trouble. And if Donald Trump stays on topic, if he stays direct and focused on the fact that she is the status quo and he is the change, and that there was no daylight between her and Biden, and that that she hasn't changed her values, then he just needs to keep pushing that and he'll win. I think she's going to be prepared, just to say this last thing, she will have practiced, like Lloyd Benson. That was all, all these things are pre-recorded in their mind. They've already done. I know her team has given her like 3 or 4 of these things. If he does this, keep repeating this. And that's what I think we should count those, identify them right away.
Yeah.
So she'll
absolutely.
go after them that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people make bingo cards, right, Kira? I mean, what do you think is going to be popular on those bingo cards tonight?
She's muted. She's muted.
Yeah. There we go.
Sorry, I had to mute. I had to go check because there was some kerfuffle outside. Got to make sure
Fire's
not knocking on my door
Yeah.
to get out of the house. So I had to go check on that really quick. We're fine. Well, I think that probably the Harris campaign had to return a lot of bingo cards when they had to agree to cut mics. Because I think her big play was Yas Queen. She was just going to Yas Queen her way through this debate. And it works for her when she gets to do it. Fair enough. And so I think she has a strategy beyond that. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of platitudes. Kamala Harris is not an intelligent woman. She doesn't have a lot of information. She's from California. She's never really had to face a lot of questions. Of course, we know what happened to her in the 2020 primaries, and she didn't even make it to Iowa. This is really she's never even had a hard interview, you guys. This is going to be the hardest interview she's ever done on live television, a presidential debate. So it's going to be wild, but I do think, and I think she, of course, senses it. It works in Trump's favor to have a more disciplined Trump. You have to wait for that mic, because the best debater in this debate tonight it's going to be Kamala Harris versus Kamala Harris. You just let her talk. Because even if she does sound like she's saying something cool, she's going to run out of things to say because she's not very smart. Just let her talk. So I think we'll see a Trump just letting it ride. And I think we'll see a Kamala who's just leaning heavily on platitudes.
Yeah. Yeah, very good, very good. Well, it looks like here the producers found a debate bingo card. Brian, do you get a look at this? What pops off the card here?
Well, it just shows the nature of the debates. Watching that montage you played earlier, notice that you didn't have anything older than Reagan, because you go back to the debate in 1960 between Richard Nixon and John Kennedy, and both men are giving substantive policy answers based on the issues, and the moderators are being fair. It's a very mature discussion of politics, but it's not exciting. There's no gotcha lines. There's no quips and clips that you can put on social media. Of course, social media didn't exist back then, and even then, Richard Nixon wouldn't refuse to do debates ever again. He didn't debate in 68 or 72 because he felt that the television format just cheapened the arena. It cheapened the ideas. And look how far we've come since then. They're not going to be debating each other's issues. They're going to try and get in, as many, Lloyd Benson lines as they could. He was ready for that line because Dan Quayle had been comparing himself to Jack Kennedy in the past. So both of them are going to have these lines ready to go. And I think, for Trump, he's been on TV for 40, 50 years. He's been in the spotlight. He knows how to handle himself. He knows how to control the frame of a conversation. Whereas Harris is not quite so experienced. You know, she got embarrassed by Tulsi Gabbard in the Democratic debates 4 years ago.
Yes,
So
that's a great point, and I wanted to show that clip here because when you talk about how they used to have big substantive policy debates on policy, and nowadays it does seem to be more of a trying to attack someone's character or their record. And when you have a record like Kamala Harris, it's pretty easy to attack. And this was back in 2020 as Kamala was trying to build some steam. Tulsi Gabbard just demolished her in this legendary moment. So here, let's watch this.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
And I inhale. I did inhale.
She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I mean, talk about a record to be running from, not running on, right?
We're releasing Kamala's America, a full-blown, I think, 100-page report on just documenting her record on everything. It'll be hot linked to video clips as well, documenting that, and we're going to make it free to anybody in the country that wants it. And if you want to give out 50,000 of them, we'll make a deal, and you'll be able to do that, because everybody needs to see this stuff. Her record is so much worse. When Tulsi does this, it's like, okay, there's just 1,000 more items on that list. That hits so hard. If President Trump, former President Trump, is able to score just like that, continually score, well, he could go the entire debate doing that.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
She wants to give sex change operations to illegal aliens. I mean, this is like
South Park.
It's not even
Kira,
fair.
Yeah, Kira, you're a resident of California. You've been there since she was an AG, and then of course you're senator. I mean, you may have some more insights here onto that record that Elizabeth speaks of. But I mean, how does she avoid her history in California?
Well, you lived here, Matt. You know what it is. The politicians here, we have a Democrat supermajority. They don't face any kind of pushback. There's never any kind of curiosity. There's never investigations into what they're doing. Our press pool here in California it's access media, right? It's just it's pay to play. You write nice things about the power players and you don't dig. And so that's what Kamala came up in, as well as our governor, Gavin Newsom. So she's never had to face a hard question. I mean, how does someone like her succeed in California? Well, you just fail up. There's no opposition here. You just fail up. If you're the right person in the right place and you have the right connections, you'll get to the top. And Kamala, by the way, I know I say her name wrong, but I don't care, because when I first said it wrong, people got so upset. I was like, well, now I'm never going to say it right. So, but Kamala has quite the reputation here in California, and don't get skeeved out by the way people describe it, because I'll tell you what, when I moved to California, I could not believe how dirty people talked about her. Democrats and Republicans, they would talk about her sexual history. I thought it was so rude and misogynistic, and I would say, why does everybody talk about Kamala this way? On both sides of the fence, it's not even a secret. And then one day I realized, it's actually true, and nobody cares. Nobody thinks that it's a bad thing. Nobody holds it against her here. It's just how she got to the top, and it's fine. So that's how you have maybe the next president of the United States. Someone
the strange thing about that
does not belong there.
Kira, don't you think that the strange thing about that is Donald Trump's sex life or fake sex life, the accusations, unfounded accusations, have been part of the attacks against him for 8 years now, nonstop. And nobody feels, or, the Democrats don't feel that that's not fair game. But I don't really think that anybody would consider it okay if Donald Trump went after Kamala the way they've gone after him in that area, in that realm. Do you?
But if it weren't for double standards, the left would have no standards at all. So I guess it
was a rhetorical question anyway.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we know for tonight, folks, is we are about 14 minutes or so away from the top of the hour when the debate starts. We are watching a feed live here, so we'll cut to it when it begins. But one of the things we know is that there had been some back and forth over the rules for tonight, and one of the things we heard was that the Harris camp was not too keen on the idea of having muted mics, which was something that was brought into the debate last time between Trump and Biden. And it may be because Kamala likes to defend herself during moments like this. Let's watch Kamala here with her famous "I'm speaking."
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait.
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation. Okay?
Please.
Okay.
Non-answer.
Trying to answer you
The
now.
American people deserve a straight answer.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President. I'm speaking. Yeah, I'm about to. I will not be lectured by the Vice President.
Wow, I didn't realize how many times she did that in one debate.
That is just so gutter.
You
Okay?
guys, imagine
gutter.
having to hear that every day as an American citizen. Imagine her standing up at the lectern, standing up at that podium every day and telling America, I'm speaking. You're not really experiencing what you think you're experiencing. Shut up, America. I'm speaking. Imagine getting lectured by her every day. We have to win, America. Donald Trump has to win.
I know, just for that reason alone, Kira. I mean, she is so officious and so full of herself. But it's all just a facade,
Of course, that's all she has.
She just wrote it down. She had a consultant say, "Okay, this will nail him." And what about the weakness of Matt? What about the weakness? Now, some people would say he's being a gentleman, but you know what? If you're going to run, if a woman is going to run against a man, you don't act like a wuss when she is playing that.
But to be fair, they were up against it because don't forget, we just come through the summer OBLM. Kamala Harris is a Black woman.
She's Black. I forgot.
Specter of all of that, all of what was going. That's the only reason she won that debate.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. That if America had been in a slightly reasonable frame of mind at that time, we would have looked at it and said, "Well, she looks ridiculous. She's done nothing but scold him the whole time." But America lost its damn mind at that moment in history.
Yeah.
So forget.
We're still in recovery. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Brian, the context matters. I mean, context really does matter. Akira brings up a good point about being in that mind frame at that time, BLM, the Summer of Love, COVID, and all of that. And so you don't really have a lot of that to rely on this go around. So even for Trump, if we can pivot to Trump a little bit, what do you think Trump needs to do in order to come out ahead? And I wouldn't even necessarily say he has to, win over Democrats or convince the left to vote for him. What's your take? Where do you think he pivots here, if he does?
Well, I think his strategy needs to be exactly the same as his strategy in the debate against Biden. Just come out and show that, contrary to all the media reports that he's a raving lunatic, Russian spy, crazy person, that he's calm, collected, he's competent, he knows what he's doing. Remind people that during his term, we had low unemployment, high wages, the economy was doing great, nobody was eating cats. So he just needs to project that confidence, and he did it really well in the Biden debate, probably because of the the muted mics. It prevented the back and forth interrupting that had gone on in the 2020 debates with Biden. And he just let Biden self-destruct. And I think he can do the same thing here. I think back to 2012, the vice presidential debate, Joe Biden against Paul Ryan. Most of us on the right assumed that Paul Ryan was going to win that debate because he's a smart guy and Biden is, not. But Biden came out there and he didn't even try to stand toe to toe when it came to the intellectual side, debating the facts. He just went after Ryan and mocked him and, metaphorically, kept punching him in the face. And he came away looking like he, was the better debater. Ryan was like a nerd getting stuffed into a locker there. That won't work, obviously, now, because if Trump does anything, even just raise his voice, he's going to be portrayed as a bully against, the poor woman. So again, I think just calm and confident, and remind people of how good things were and how good things can be again, make America great again, and how Kamala's policies are awful, and let her destroy herself.
Yeah, I think that you raise a very good point.
Sorry, Matt, I'm sorry. Let me just, because I just came out.
Go.
Brian, do you think that Kamala is going to come up with the with the lies, the good people on both sides lie, that kind of thing? Is she going to actually do that because she thinks that Trump won't be able to properly respond? Because I think Biden brought it up in, a semi-lucid point so he could lie in the last debate. And, President Trump didn't have that. It's hard to take that, to deconstruct that and just say, well, you're a liar. It just doesn't sound presidential. It's too difficult. What, you look foolish?
I can see her trying to bring up some of those things, the fine people hoax, the suckers and losers hoax, all of those things, because that's really what the, I think a lot of the people in her campaign and the leftist media in complex, they live in a bit of a bubble where they think that everybody sees Trump the way they do. And they've got some cognitive dissonance with the fact that tens of millions of Americans love Trump and don't believe their lies. So I think she might just try and throw that out there and then wait for the accolades to come as if she just made some deep point.
Big hit.
Yeah. Well, Trump, in 2016, we saw Trump take on 17 Republicans on that stage. And one of the more, highlights of those moments was this interaction with Jeb Bush when Jeb was probably the second runner, that he was in second place in the polling, and he started to slip on down the polls and move further away down the debate stage. Let's watch how Trump handled Jeb during these confrontations.
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is principled. You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so
Doesn't matter.
far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
So far I'm doing better. You started off over here, Jeb. You're moving over further and further. Pretty soon you're going to be off the end.
This doesn't do a thing to solve the problem.
One at a time.
I think that was the moment the Republican Party figured out who they were dealing with, right, Kira? I mean, this is a new, you're not going to insult your way to the presidency. Well, he kind of did.
He did.
He kind of did, and that is the phenomenon of Trump. And that is why the left still hasn't been able to figure him out. They don't understand. They think that they could just talk about how inartful he is and that's good. We're in a different era, and Trump proved that. People don't care about the $10 words. People want to hear real thoughts. I really think that that's what he has to do tonight, too, as well. He just has to keep reminding people, by the way, everybody, Kamala is still the vice president of the United States. She's in this administration. Everything she's telling you she's going to do, she could be doing right now. And everything she's saying she's going to fix is broken because of the administration that she's in. That's all he has to do. But that's why no one can beat Trump when he is authentically himself. And that's why I always get tired of people, especially conservatives, who get all anxious about Trump and he talks so weird and he sounds so cringy. Trump can't be anything other than who he is. That's how he wins. Even if it's weird, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels cringy sometimes. Trump wins when he's just being Trump and not trying to be anybody else. And as you said, Matt, and as we can see, it works. And that's the thing. That is the thing. That's the it factor that Kamala doesn't have and can't compete with.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, look who's on ABC right now. That's Donna Brazil.
Shut up. She's really on
she's
now.
on,
talking.
and I think she's most famous for what, Elizabeth? I'll let you break the news.
She's most famous for handing the questions to for the debate to Hillary Clinton. I just don't know how she recovered from that. I don't know, should there be a law? I mean, wasn't that wrong for her to do? Obviously it was wrong, but it seems to me very, very significant. This is like, dare I say, election interference? I don't know. What do you guys think? It just seems so strange to me.
Yeah, but this is another reason why this is partly the Republican Party is to blame, because that's a party prosecution, right? That's the Republican Party should have gone after that. The Republican Party should have never let that slide. Trump wouldn't have let that slide. But the Republican Party are so used to that, the uniparty rules of DC, and we're just sort of the professional losers now. We're the Washington Generals. They should have pressed that. It should have been a big story. They should have launched an investigation, even if they couldn't get the MSM on their side. So that, in my mind, that's Republican.
It's not just Donna. Hillary Clinton took those questions.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think the buried lead there is that this probably happens a lot. This is just the way things are done. The media and the Democratic Party, they're almost just one and the same. They're sister organizations. And that shows Trump's savvy and courage all the more that he's going into what he knows is enemy territory. He did it before and he's doing it again. Hopefully it'll turn out just as well this time.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen with these moderators, Matt? Are they going to be fair and wonderful like you and fabulous? Are they going to be fabulous like you?
Yeah, right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Here's the thing. What's interesting is that I believe when we walked away from the Biden-Trump debates, there wasn't too many people complaining about how Jake Tapper and was it Martha Raddatz?
Dana Bash.
Dana Bash. Yeah, there wasn't too many complaints about that. That they kind of let it evolve and happen on their own, and they were following up with Biden and trying to get him to answer the question, and so I think we're going to see. Hopefully, we'll see something of the same tonight.
No.
I mean, that's what you always hope
Absolutely
for.
Not. No, they just set Biden up. They just set Biden up. They're not going to treat her
in hindsight,
that way.
yes.
They're not going to treat her that way. Absolutely not. She needs to win.
Right.
He could, maybe not. She needs to win. So absolutely not.
They don't have another backup candidate.
Mm-mm.
I don't like trying to predict the future. I have no idea what they're going to do, and we'll find out in a few minutes live right here on WorldNetDaily. I look back to Chris Wallace and some of the others 4 years ago. They were clearly, it set it up so that Trump was debating both Biden and the moderators. And I wonder if some of the smarter ones knew that this actually helped Trump. It made him look like a maverick, an outsider, somebody fighting the whole system. And it actually improved his stature with people. And so maybe that's why, Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, they pulled back a little. And I also wonder how this will play in. Obviously, most of these journalists, they're left-wing, they're Democratic partisans. But they're also, as a class, they are protective of journalism as an institution. And Kamala has been kind of spitting in their faces, saying that she's not going to do these interviews. And the only one she did, it was 40 minutes that they cut down to 18. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that is going to creep in where they might try and hold her to account a little more than they might otherwise, just because they know this is their only chance to talk to her.
So embarrassing.
I'll tell you what, here's the one thing. I do think that no one likes her. So I do think she's very unlikable and they don't like her. And I think once
what
her
about the joy?
Out,
what about don't you?
Well, why are they pushing joy for
yes.
her? We're so normal. We're so joyful.
Well,
but she thinks the ladies don't protest too much.
Well, she definitely has. We do know that she has lost a lot of staffers over her time and her tenure as the vice president.
92 or 97%.
Yeah. So there, you might have something there where people are just kind of like, but here's the key. The key is, and RFK pointed this out in his speech when he left the race to join the Trump campaign, is they don't care. They're not running on policies. They're not running on fixing anything. They're purely running on hate. And it looks like hate of Trump, that is. It looks like the debate is about to begin. I mean, we can keep that side by side up here so we don't miss anything. Those are looks like the moderators for tonight. Why don't we go to this? We'll keep it on here as much as possible. And we'll be back during some.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so bad at interrupting.
What did you want to point out?
I just want to say that all of his coverage, this guy here, and I don't know his name, was 100% positive for Kamala, got it right, and 97% negative for Trump.
Gotcha.
Okay. I mean, that's, yeah.
Yep.
It's not going to be fair.
Right. All right. Well, we will dip in. We'll check back with you when we get to a commercial break or anything else that might breaks throughout. But sit back and we'll watch this train. Well, we'll see where it goes. Thanks, folks.
Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
See you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that
to get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as vice president of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is up.
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation. And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue.
Well, folks, it's been just over an hour since they started this debate. They promised two commercial breaks. We'll keep an eye on the feed there. But I mean, we're going to do a full debrief after this thing is over. It's a short commercial break. But first, Elizabeth, quick take. What's your assessment so far?
Well, what I would say is Kamala Harris is so rude and so insulting and degrading to President Trump. He is being very statesmanlike. He is not grinding her face in insults and lies. And she has lied so many times. I was trying to take notes. I've got all these notes and I can't keep up with it. I'm going to have to go back and just break it down. She lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. And the things that she says, I didn't get $400 million handed to me on a silver platter, whatever. That the military or generals consider him to be a disgrace and an embarrassment. I mean, it was incredible. If Donald Trump did this, all that would happen tomorrow would be clips of these on all of the, regime media, and they would be playing them over and over and over and over again. And I think that those two moderators are hacks. They have literally fed her.
Said it.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought at the very first, like, 2.5 minutes, I was thinking, well, maybe they're going to be like the last debate duo. They fed her stuff. They just cut Donald Trump off after she did this big soliloquy. Yeah.
Kira, real quick, you're agreeing on the moderator thing there for sure.
Yeah, moderators are definitely in the tank. I think Trump is doing well. Kamala obviously baited him with that rally question. We'll talk about that later. I'm sure we'll break it down. I think Kamala is doing just what she needs to do, which is to not completely fall apart. So this will be a win for her tomorrow in the media, no matter what. But if you pay attention, Trump's got all the information, and she, as I predicted earlier, she's just got platitudes and talking points. So I think this is going to play really well to her base. Anybody else? No, I don't think anybody else is getting anything new from Kamala tonight or interesting.
Yeah. Brian, what's your observation so far?
I agree with that. I think what she's doing is going to play well with the people who are already supporting her, because they're seeing it through that lens. Oh, she's the strong girl boss calling out the the old crazy man. But I think the story is going to end up being the big story when it's all said and done is going to be that once again Trump is fighting the opponent and the moderators. You notice they've interrupted him to fact check him 3 or 4 times now, but they haven't checked Kamala at all, even though she's lied about several things.
I think it's working for him, though. I think that's working for him because every time they do, they're giving him more time to get information out, which is what he's trying to do, because the people who are watching this broadcast tonight are people who would never tune in to a Trump speech otherwise. So he knows he's giving people information they haven't heard before. So I think in a way, I don't know, it could just be me, but I feel like it's working out in a way for him.
Yeah, I think you might be right, especially when it comes to this on the fly fact checking that they're doing and that they obviously are not doing to Kamala. Especially when it comes to the Virginia governor stuff, the Very Fine People hoax, even Project 2025. I mean, these things are fracking. Yeah, this is easily debunkable, and they simply aren't doing any of that. So we have the feed still up. Looks like they're still at a break, so we're still paying attention to that. I mean, as TV viewing goes, there have been a ton of zingers tonight, and it's been, I think, one of the biggest moments was when Trump asked Kamala if he could finish his line.
I'm speaking.
I'm speaking.
I'm talking now.
So we'll have those. We'll have some of those clips pulled as we get around. Well, let's go around the horn here. I'm going to apologize up front because I might have to break in when we go to it. But Elizabeth, when you hear now, of course, Kamala is being extremely trying to be polite and so forth. Oh, it looks like the debate is coming back here. So. All right. I strung it along as far as I could.
All right, here we go.
Let's get inside.
This historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn
to
the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here.
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said, going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time's up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page.
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
you,
what
Mr.
her plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump-
the
President
former
Trump-
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
gonna
just need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Past
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made
of...
a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right, well, there you have it, folks. We are nearing, well, that's the end of the debate. We'll be back for the closing remarks. Kira, I'm I'm curious to know your thoughts here as they had this last half hour going all the way. I mean, all the way to the point where, again, the fact checking that is not being done on Kamala Harris that they do on Trump. I mean, it's incredible.
Again, unsurprising. I think I'm pretty amazed that ABC is going to let this debate close, and they haven't asked one question about the assassination attempt of Donald Trump.
Very good point.
Which is huge news. And to Elizabeth's many points about how if this was Kamala, what would we be doing? I mean, if it was Kamala or Joe Biden that had been shot, would this debate be about anything else? They've fact checked him into oblivion, which I pointed out earlier, I think is actually working for him, but they have fact checked him into oblivion. And he was the person that had to bring up getting shot. And they didn't follow up on that. This unprecedented event. This is ridiculous. These people are absolutely ridiculous. I'm running out of words for them, and I'm not surprised. I don't want anyone to think that I am surprised. Of course, this is nothing new. Of course, this is how it was going to go. But it's just so pathetic. It's so pathetic.
Yeah. Elizabeth, you're nodding, of course. Nodding your head. Yes.
What? I'm going to throw up my notepads again. Anyway, I've got all these notes. So I'm clipping up the video afterwards, each section on each question. And I really am going to go through and see how many times they fact checked him, how many times they allowed her to have a soliloquy, all of that. But I'll make a couple of other points. One thing that Kamala is doing very well is she is turning to the camera very frequently, and she is speaking to the camera and being empathetic with the people. And this is what I thought that they were going to have President Trump do. I thought that they would have him turn to the camera and talk to the people and say, look, whatever it is, but, I'm for you. And you know that because you lived through 4 years when I was in the White House, and are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Because that's what you need to see. He should be speaking more to the camera.
Well, he's got a closing statement.
Yes, he's
So
got
he
a
might
closing
bring that.
statement, but all I'm saying is what I'm trying to do is be critical, and not just be critical of what they are doing, but to also look realistically at how she's coming off. She is, I find her very offensive and blah, 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 blah. I could give a whole list of that. But she is speaking to the camera. And the one thing that is happening that we weren't sure was going to happen is she going to have word salads? She's not doing word salads. Is she going to do a cackle or anything like that? We didn't expect that, but she hasn't done the cackle, and she has held her own. Now, much of that's been lying and false accusations. I mean, those are the worst things. But if you lie well, you know, the moderators are not giving, I think she got the questions in advance. She lies continually, but she is holding her own in her in her answers.
She's just not falling apart. That's all that is. She's just not falling apart. And you'll notice that's why I think the plan here is to give Trump as much time to talk as possible, because then she doesn't have to talk. He's taking advantage of it. To your point, Elizabeth, I would like to say I think Trump is doing the right thing. I think I'm going to be in the minority when I get online tonight to talk to other conservatives about this. But I think he is doing the right thing. He doesn't need to talk to the people. He talks to the people every day when he's out in the rallies. What he's doing is giving information, because there are people who are watching this debate who will never see President Trump speak live. They will never be given the opportunity to hear him speak in a news report or in the New York Times, because they don't cover him. So he's telling them all of the stuff, all of the news that they haven't heard. So I think that's what he's doing. Now we'll see. I think you're right. He does need to speak to people. We'll see if he can pull that out. His final statement.
Well, we'll get more reaction from the panel here, including you, Brian, but we're going to go back in for these closing statements, and we'll be back shortly.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like We're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center.
Let's get rid of these.
I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you.
First, I just have to say they were the worst moderators. I wanted to throw something at the television. I was so frustrating every time they jumped in.
Yeah, the computer screen.
I need to put bulletproof glass.
Because I am impressed with how Kamala just made it through that. I really am. I'm very impressed. She was so mean. She was so deceitful. She was so slanderous. And it's very, very hard to overturn lies and accusations in a debate. It is terribly hard. I just imagine having to, instead of answer a question, deconstruct and falsify every lie that she had said. That's impossible. And so that's what we have to do. We have to do, and all of the people that represent President Trump, his team, has to go out and completely take down, because a liar is not somebody you want in office. But I will say this on an upside, that I think that when people go into the voting booth, they're not going to remember this debate. They're going to remember that, like me, when I went to go buy coffee the other day from Amazon and I saw how much I spent, those little stupid K-cups that you get sucked into and then you got K-cups forever. The box that I used to spend $30 on, a big box, right? And I always buy bulk, now costs $40-some. I couldn't believe it. And I thought that's my little anecdote. And I think that people are going to vote based on their lived experience. To use
you're right.
They're going to do that. And also, if we can do the job of debunking the lies that she said, I think that's important.
we've been following that along, and I know you all have at home, but we definitely have some examples and some proofs to do that. Brian, I want to go to you real quick as we get these clips lined up and get some still images lined up. What kind of stood out to you tonight in terms of the performance of both Trump and Kamala?
I don't think Trump was quite as good as he was in the debate with Biden. And I think Kamala was better than I think some people expected. Neither were great. I think Trump was fine. I don't think he did anything, too crazy. I don't think what they actually said is going to matter. Like Elizabeth said, people are not going to remember what they said in the debate when they go to the voting booth. They're going to remember their experiences. But I think the things that will stick from the debate are facial expressions and occasional one-liners. And that's, like I said before we started, that's really what debates have become. It's just a contest to see who can get the best line out there that's going to be repeated on TikTok and Twitter and everything else for the next few weeks. And I think both candidates are going to pull that. I've been watching different reactions. Some people say Trump crushed it. Some people say that Kamala's doing well. I'm sure the single childless cat lady demographic thought that Kamala just slayed out there.
She really talked to them.
But then I think in the end, I don't think it's going to move the needle much. The people who were already voting for Kamala are going to keep voting for her. The people who were already voting Trump will still vote for him. There's that small group in the middle. And really, it's not even about convincing someone to vote for you. It's about turning out the people who already support you, making sure they go vote. And that's where the ground game is going to be important. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan. Who's more enthusiastic? And I don't know what,
Yeah,
I'm not sure what everyone else thinks. Who's going to come away from this debate feeling more enthusiastic to go vote for their candidate?
Yeah, Kira, I think, when you compare Trump's performance last time, he was much more measured. He was much more calm during the Biden debate. And this one, he really let loose, I felt. And I think he really tried to appeal to the base to say, hey, man, these are the problems that are going on in our country, and pointing things out that Elizabeth was pointing out about just their daily lives and their lived experiences. Do you get the sense that Trump, because you said earlier during that quick break, that you might be taking a little bit of a different take on his performance tonight?
No, I think Brian's absolutely right. Scheme of things, this is really not going to make a lot of difference. So you have to go into a debate as a candidate, understanding what the debate is for. You have to have a goal, right? So, for instance, Biden's first debate, the goal was just to keep him standing for 2 hours. They didn't meet the goal, and now we're here. Kamala's goal was to not look like a complete moron. I think she met that goal. Trump's goal was to speak to people in energy states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, right? So he spent a lot of time looping back to the fracking stuff, looping back to the energy stuff. He was talking to them because he knew that was going to be his main audience. So that was smart. And then he did the other thing, which is that tiny group of people who are tuning in to see, is Kamala going to be the person that they don't want to vote for Kamala? They don't like her. Joe failed them. They didn't want Kamala, but they don't want to vote necessarily for a Republican. They're tuning in to see, can I make myself do this? And I don't think Kamala did it, because at the end of the day, just like Elizabeth was pointing out, their coffee's more expensive. Their gas is more expensive. There's illegal aliens squatting in their front yards. Our kids are learning how to trans themselves at school. It's mass chaos out there. That's exactly what we're all dealing with every day, even Democrat voters. Yes, the MSM class, the very online class, are going to look at what she did and be really excited about it. But to Brian's point, is it going to move the needle and change how anyone felt about either of them? If it changed anyone's mind, I think it would be to say, yeah, I don't find Kamala that inspiring, actually, as the late night shows were telling me she is.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was pretty tact or a great tactic by Trump was to keep hammering the point that she's in office now, that her and Biden are in control now. And we have that clip here when he challenged her to say, hey, let's end the debate right now, go over to Congress and
good.
Close the border. So let's watch this exchange if we have that available.
I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. Military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps.
Yeah, I think this is a different clip here. We'll get that other clip in a second, but Elizabeth, don't you think that is the tactic of going after their record or of what they're doing now and saying, why don't you do these things now?
Yeah,
I think that's a winning argument.
I thought that was very, 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 very strong. Brian brought up facial expressions. Trump's is always the same. He does that smile thing too, but just very, very strong, determined. She was so, she was smirking and she was sort of looking like she was pitying him and disgusted by him. She was really, really emotive in her facial expressions, and none of them were flattering to her other than her base. Her base would find that great. Yeah, she's, looking down on him and making fun of him and mocking him. I don't think that does her any good with anybody else. So, but I thought that what you just said, when he said twice, once at the end, go to Washington, D.C., go to that big, beautiful White House, go to Congress, get everybody out of bed, whatever, and do the things that you say. I think people will remember that.
Yeah.
I only wish that,
let's play that.
Yeah,
we have it here.
Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get
Look
him
at
out
her
of bed,
face.
You'll wake him up.
Americans
4
don't
o'clock in
want
the
that.
afternoon, you'll say, come on
Yeah.
down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
Yeah, Akira. I mean, that was
good.
again, that was a great moment, and you pointed out her reactions to that. What did you read off there?
Yeah, no, I don't think I think Elizabeth called it, like her fan base is going to be like, yes, queen. Yeah, we loved it. But like, no, I remember when Hillary Clinton was running. And I remember Rush Limbaugh got into a lot of trouble for saying this, but he was right, because he understood politics and he understands electoral politics. Selling a woman to the American public is hard. That's hard anyway, as the leader of the free world. It's been a hard sell since the beginning of elections. So it's gonna have to be a pretty impressive woman. But what Americans don't want is the same way we feel the same way with entertainment. We lean towards men. We lean towards male comedians. We have trouble, even in radio. I'm in radio, even in radio. A woman's voice, it's good for kids to listen to. It's not that great for adults to listen to. So you have to be careful not to be getting all high up in your higher register. Are you kidding? Did you just really say that? She did that for like almost the whole debate. I'm sorry, Americans don't want that. Even the ones who say they're supporting her, it's like voting for a president with a mustache.
Yeah.
It's just something we are not comfortable with.
We're just not going to do that. But I'll tell you
You need
what.
full beard. You need a full beard.
Did you notice? I mean, this is pretty darn obvious. I'm just stating the obvious. But not only did they give her the small podium, but they also adjusted the camera on her so that she was at least as tall as Donald Trump through the entire thing. And they did very few of those pans, like straight on pans, because they didn't want the diminutive. And I'm not putting, hey, there have been very strong women that are very short, and men as well. But yeah,
those the shorter men are the worst kind.
You better be a really strong woman to be elected as a president of the most powerful nation on earth. It is one thing to elect a woman just in any other nation, but when we put a woman in power, she better be powerful.
And she's gonna have to be likable. Way more
likable's good too. But I'm talking about to the warlords and to Khamenei and to Putin and Xi and all the rest of them. This woman is not powerful. She's not impressive. She's not a serious candidate at all. She has done a good job at pretending. She acted tonight. She memorized so many lines. She was memorizing lines and soliloquies, monologues, these last week.
That's California politics.
Yeah.
That's how you debate. They don't even do debates here. Our politicians don't have debates. Do you know that? Our politicians, we don't have gubernatorial
because you'd
debates.
Be debating liberals and liberals, right? What's the point?
What does the press need? Governor Newsom never even ran for office. He didn't even run an ad campaign. He didn't have to. He just got reelected because he's Newsom. So she's never. That's all they do. She's never debated. We don't debate here.
Brian, when we think about the way the fact checking was going on, we had this moment here with Trump talking about the stories we've been talking about on WorldNetDaily about the eating of the dogs and the cats and the ducks and the geese and all of the crazy things that we've seen.
He was fact checked. That's
Exactly.
never happened. It's never happened.
They really stepped in for her.
Well, I'm gonna do a quick warning here. We're gonna watch that. We're gonna watch this exchange on that. But then we also, because we have great producers doing their own fact checking, we have some footage. I haven't seen it yet, but
It's gross. I've seen it.
You've seen it?
all.
Okay. Well, let's watch.
It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. A lot of towns don't want to.
So and obviously Kamala laughing there is let's bring up
She
this
doesn't
video.
know that. I will say this.
Please,
if
go ahead.
that woman, sorry, Matt.
No.
Sorry, I'm sorry. sorry. If that woman doesn't know what is happening because of voodoo worshiping Haitians, that she brought 150,000 of them into our country, and she doesn't know that they are literally mowing down people in the streets and driving in to whole buildings and churches and flipping cars. This is not a little bit. All of their insurance has skyrocketed. They can't even afford car insurance. But if she doesn't know that people are coming home and looking across the street and seeing their cat strung up by on a tree and being slaughtered for meat, and that a woman just the other day was found lying in her driveway eating a cat with fur hanging out of her mouth. If Kamala Harris doesn't know this about America, then shame on her, because she should know. And if she really did care about America's, I don't want to come home. Oh, well, I'd shoot him.
What did you do? Why'd you kill the cat? Smile for me. Smile with your teeth. Go like this. Did you eat that cat? Did you eat it? No, why'd you kill it? Did you guys see all this?
No, we pulled up and she was just laying there with it.
Did you see her eating it?
Eating it.
She was eating it?
Yeah, she was.
You call the Humane Society, see if they'll come pick this cat up. It's deceased.
It was raw. She was eating it raw. She ripped the head off the cat and ate it raw, laying in the driveway.
And Kamala's laughing. And
And
they're
she's laughing.
laughing.
Yeah. I mean,
They're
that'll
laughing
be.
at people.
Yeah, if somebody's smart out there, they'll take that video that we just watched and put it next to Kamala
Let's
laughing.
do it.
Trump's gotta have people
and
on
let
it.
that go
Yeah.
wild. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah.
So the two things I see here. One, they play a game, the moderators and the news media and Kamala Harris. They play this game where they say it's not really happening, it's been debunked. Well, what does debunked mean? It means disproven. We know that this didn't happen. But they don't know that that didn't happen. They called up a city official in the city and said, "Hey, is this happening?" And he said, "No, we've had no reports." So they say, "Yep, debunked." And that's been the headline, and that's what the moderators did.
A government
correct
official
Trump,
said it.
and that's what Kamala Harris repeated, as if that's the end of the story. And they even went. I think it's the New York Times saying that people were talking without evidence that this was happening. Well, isn't the fact that citizens of the community are coming and saying this is happening, isn't that evidence?
No, those are
eyewitness testimony is
citizens,
evidence
not
in
officials.
in a courtroom. And the second thing that comes out of that is, and I tweeted this earlier today, the people who say that diversity is our strength, they seem to have this idea that everyone in the world is basically the same, that cultures are essentially the same. So it's like they can't even comprehend that there are cultures in the world where eating cats and just ducks and geese right off the street is just a normal thing. But there are places in the world where that happens. And when you bring the people from those countries here, they are going to continue doing those things. And yet we're just supposed to ignore that as if the entire idea is absurd, that somebody from a culture that eats whatever animal happens to be crossing their path would continue doing it in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Folks, so to the point of the fact checking that's going on, WorldNetDaily, you go to our posts over there on WorldNetDaily on X, and we are fact checking. We are showing you the video. In fact, we have this video here when Kamala said that she wouldn't be confiscating guns because she happens to own one herself. I believe our producers are going to get that up there and show this to you because we have the footage here of her saying just that.
What would you do about the millions of specifically assault weapons that are already in circulation? What do you do about those?
Well, there are approximately 5 million, to your point, Craig. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program. It's got to be smart. We got to do it the right way.
What would you do?
Well, there you go, folks. Mandatory buyback program. You must take this money.
Her values haven't changed. Her values haven't changed.
Right. Oh, yes.
This is what I'm saying. I think that I give the American voter a lot more credit. I think a lot of people are willing to give them these days. And I think a lot of the stuff we see that we don't like is cheating, to be honest. I honestly think when Americans understand, I know that we see her lies and we are so frustrated because right now, as we're talking on CNN, they're talking about how presidential she looked and how great she did. And they're talking to all her fans. I know that that's what we're seeing and that's concerning. But what I see is an American electorate that's looking at her saying things that sound, really sassy and fun and cool, but understanding like, no, she hasn't closed the border. Of course not. No, she's not for the Second Amendment because I'm not if I'm the Democrat voter and I've loved Kamala and Joe this whole time. Well, I know she's not for fracking. I know she's not for the Second Amendment because I'm not for those things. And that's why I voted for her. So I think that most people know that she's lying. I think most people understand that. I think it is very transparent when she speaks that it is all lies. Now, I think the question is, how many people want to believe those lies? Because I think plenty of liberals and progressives, I have some in my own family, I'm not going to name no names, but some people in my own family who are like, yeah, I know it's all BS. I know she's a liar. I know that I only get one side of the news cycle, but this is what I want to believe. And you can't stop me from believing it.
Elizabeth, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking about this inspiring speech that I heard from a lady in Chicago, and she was taken down that council meeting, and she stood there. I don't know if you've seen this, and it gives me chills. And she even I'll just say part of it. She says, "You better get up out of the Democrat Party." She is yelling. She's a black lady, right? And she was on fire. "You better get up out of the Democrat Party, save yourselves, save your families, save your dignity, save your jobs." She's talking to them at the save your seats, because if y'all don't, we're coming for your seats. We ain't taking this no more. We ain't taking something from a bunch of people who have broken into this country and now have completely broke the city, completely broke the country, have completely disgraced the United States of America. And she goes on. I mean, I watched it 10 times because it was so good. But when she said that they had disgraced the United States of America, you could hear the cracking in her voice, and she said, "Oh my God." And it was this moment, because when you start talking about this stuff, I know you know what I'm talking about, Kira, you just suddenly it'll hit you to the core of exactly what's been happening, what they're planning, what they're going to do, the humiliation of Afghanistan and this border. And she was just choked up, and I related to her. And when Kamala does this fake thing like Trump has been dividing America, it is the Democrats who have been dividing America for decades upon decades. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. We're not very good at reading comments, and the people
they've been
down
great
below.
though. They've been great.
They've been great. I'm sorry. I love liberty. I love you too. I mean, whatever. Same old BS, she says. And
I want to circle back to what Elizabeth said about that woman and her very emotional delivery. This is a disgrace. And you'll notice that that's a word Kamala used a lot tonight. She tried to pin that word disgrace on President Trump. And I have noticed this since the beginning of her campaign, that she has they live in opposite land. They use all of the words that would apply to them, they use for their opponent, and vice versa. So joy, they're the joy camp, even though the Democrats are the most bitter, angry, haggish people in politics right now. Joy, they're so weird. We're normal. We're the ones that want, to lower the age of consent to 9, but we're normal. They're weird. She knows damn well that they're a disgrace to the military. She knows damn well that Joe Biden is a disgrace, and they have done disgraceful things and said disgraceful things. She knows it. She's not lying. She's not ignorant. She's not living in a bubble. No, Kamala knows. She knows. She used that word deliberately because they're the disgrace.
Kira, yeah, because she's a Marxist. I mean, she's a Marxist, and Trump called her out tonight on that.
A Marxist.
Yep, let's watch that clip real quick. The producers are ready to fire it away.
Yeah, I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it, and it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well.
Oh, I loved that little thing that she just did. She was gonna unleash, but she didn't get the chance to. She was gonna just spin some web of lies. Ugh.
Yeah, it was really good. Brian, you love studying history and the ideologies at war within our country, within our own party, within our own neighborhood sometimes. What is your take on just kind of the overall sense here of what Americans might take away from this? Is this truly about Marxism and socialism versus a free market economy? Is there anything else that we can take away from this on that front?
Well, folks like James Lindsay can go into detail on the whole Marxist thing and how it underpins the left in America today. Most people, it really is kind of the water we swim in, the water we as fish swim in. It's not necessarily a conscious thing. Even for somebody like Harris, she's come up through this world where it's just understood that, it's all about identity politics, which is cultural Marxism, dividing people between oppressed and oppressors, depending on, whatever intersectional diagram you're using. She believes that because she's a mixed race Black woman, whatever she considers herself.
Never heard her answer that question.
That she's she's at one pole of that intersectional thing. But I don't think it really matters that much to regular people. It is something that is subconscious in a lot of stuff. But really, you look at her policies or lack thereof, what she wants to do, grab guns and institute price controls. Just today, she came out with rent controls. She wants to, crack down on landlords who are, overcharging their renters, which, that always works out well wherever it's been tried. It's so many things that if you actually look at history and look at where things have been tried, price controls, rent controls, gun confiscation, it never works out well for the people. It's always something that leads to tyranny and totalitarianism and a lower standard of living. And yet they still think either they think that it will work this time because it's something's different, because maybe they're in charge now, or they think that nothing matters and they're just going to do it anyway because they want to rule over the ashes rather than let the American people be prosperous and have a growing middle class.
Rent controls destroy housing.
Oh, absolutely.
And ask Thomas Sowell that. I'm trying to get him to do an interview. We're trying to reach out to him because his analysis of rent controls is brilliant, and it only causes poverty. And by the way, Black American population always goes down because this works against the Black community. Rent controls do. It always destroys, and there's less housing can be built and less apartment buildings will be built. And so they'll be priced out of the market, which just ticks me off.
Yeah. Well, there's again, there's a lot to digest from this debate. I know Elizabeth says you're going to go over it with a fine tooth comb there, which I think is going to be, which will be great. But please, folks, do follow the account over on X at WorldNetDaily because we've been posting the clips, posting the fact checking. I mean, we could go. I mean, I don't know if we have the time to go into the whole abortion issue thing, but that was just a real dinger of a conversation, especially when it came to the things that Trump was pointing out with Governor Northam over there in Virginia, the former governor, talking about infanticide. We have the video; it's posted up there, so please go over there and take a look at that. I want to go around the horn here one final time, but before we do that, the Trump campaign has released a statement, and they call it here Trump campaign statement on the President Trump's debate victory. President Trump delivered a masterful debate performance tonight, prosecuting Kamala Harris's abysmal record of failure that has hurt Americans for the last 4 years. And he goes on. So please go over there. We posted that on X, and President Trump having some fun with the wordplay there in prosecuting the prosecutor herself. Brian, let's start with you. Where do you think we go from here? I don't know if they're going to plan another debate. I'm gonna say they probably won't. But you never know.
No way.
Yeah. But Brian, I'll start with you. Where do we go from here? What do you see?
Well, I think I don't think that another debate's really in anyone's interest. The more Trump talks to Harris, I think the more he legitimizes her as a presidential candidate. You could have said that maybe there was a strategy to just ignore her and say, hey, I thought I was running against Biden, and now they've got this other random person here. And for Harris, I think she got lucky this time. No crazy cackling fits. No complete word salads. I think she got confused a few times. Will she be lucky again? I think the moderators were awful. I was just checking on someone here. Patrick Bet-David says that they interrupted and corrected Trump 11 times. And of course, they didn't correct Kamala at all, even though she, had a ton of lies. So I don't think anybody's going to look at that and say, we need another debate. Everybody's just going to claim victory and move on. I'm not sure even at this point, like I said before we started, do the debates really add anything to the discourse at this point? It's not like Nixon and JFK making substantive arguments against each other's policies. It's just trying to get these one-liners, which you don't even need a debate for that. You could just go into a studio and do it, or do it when you're just out and about. It's so I don't know. I didn't come away learning anything new, but of course I'm a political junkie who's obviously already decided. So I don't know if there's anyone out there who's undecided who watched this and says, okay, well, now I've made up my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Kiro, how about yourself? Where do you think we go from here? What do you think? I kind of tend to agree that I don't think you guys were all nodding that I don't think there's going to be any more debates.
It's useless. I don't need it. Do you need it? I don't think Trump needs it. I think Brian is absolutely right. Kamala got lucky. And so she should just, I think this is as good. I wouldn't call this lucky. Like I wouldn't call this a great accomplishment, but it's better than the disaster it could have been. So I think they just retreat and pull their sound bites out of that and work with what they have. And I think, to Brian's point, again, it does behoove the Trump camp to basically ignore her, like don't legitimize her. I think as far as does this move the needle? No, this was a show. This was a show for the American people. Can Kamala show up? Can Trump talk to her? We already know, it's been wall-to-wall coverage of Donald Trump for 10 years. Are we going to hear anything different from him? No. So no one's tuning in to learn anything about him. If anything, people are tuning in to learn something about Kamala because we don't know anything about her. And guess what we learned about her? Still nothing. And I do really believe that the Americans who are going to show up at the voting booth, not the ones who are very online, the people who are going to show up at the voting booth, they are listening to what Kamala says because many of them want to vote for her, but they also know they can't pay their heating bill. And they also know that there are homeless encampments next to their kids' school. And they also know all of this other stuff that we talk about all the time. They know all of this and they're living it. That's why we're in such chaos now. And I think they look at Kamala tonight and they said, if I vote for her, it really is just an ideological vote because she offers nothing policy-wise and she offers no solutions. In fact, it sounds vaguely like she might be making everything worse. So do I vote ideologically or do I vote for my wallet. I do believe if Americans get to vote honestly in November, they're going to vote for their wallets. I don't think Kamala moved the needle with anybody who wasn't already planning to vote for her.
Yeah, fair points. Fair points there from both of you. Elizabeth, let's wrap it up with you here. Where do you think we go from here, and what do you expect? What do you expect Trump to do?
I agree with Brian. I agree with Kira, and people are going to vote with their because of their wallets or with their wallets or whatever the expression is. So yeah, that's the most important thing to people for so many reasons. It's so obvious that no one should have to even explain why people vote for on economic issues, on the economy. But I would also say that you'd have to be a complete and utter psycho not to know, and everybody sees it, that the millions of illegal aliens or illegal foreigners that are destroying our country, raping our women and girls, murdering them, beating up police, just destroying our culture and bringing terrorism in. People aren't stupid. This doesn't take smart people, but so even stupid people could do it, but the American people aren't dumb. And just like that woman in Chicago, she was talking about these immigrants. She knows what they were doing to her community. She knows that all this money, billions of dollars, are going to them and not to communities that need it, and opportunity zones and just help with things. And so people are going to vote on their wallet, and they're going to vote on the border.
Yeah, well put.
And the other
All right,
people
well,
are just idiots, and they're going to vote
They're not
ideologically,
gonna
like
vote.
Kira says.
They're not going to vote. They never vote. They're not going to vote. You can keep going out to college and get the young people to vote. The only young people who vote are Republicans.
and that's why they always. And
The
this is why they always care
are
about
more-
registration, right?
Yeah, and the
Just need-
young
if you
men
have to register.
are Republicans now. All
Yeah.
college-age men are for
I
Donald
got a
Trump.
young college-age man who's a
Amen, sister.
He's a
job. You're a
conservative.
good
Every
mama.
time I send him away to college, he comes back even more conservative.
God bless you guys. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please follow us on Rumble, because you know that censorship is coming, as our good producer Josh likes to always say. So follow us on Rumble. Follow all these folks on Rumble, on X, and everywhere else you can find us. Telegram. There's the app on Rumble. We're also on Telegram. If you're watching us on Facebook, you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for commenting. But make sure you have accounts over here on the other applications. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back here, I guess, tomorrow with our regular live show, so we'll tune in then. Thank you so much. God bless you all, and God bless America. Take care.